Hello, everybody. This is the fourth take of me trying to start this because I keep accidentally messing something up. But this is supposed to be our MATLAB Chapter 0 lesson, if you will. So you never touched computer science, you never touched coding, you never touched MATLAB. This is kind of saying, hey, okay, let's start from scratch and just try and understand how to even work with this kind of thing. So the first thing that we're going to do is typically MATLAB starts you off in this live editor uh, pane right here. And so if you're on this, you can go over to new and click this arrow and do live script, and it opens a brand new file for us to type inside of and save. If instead for some reason you're on the home pane, then we can see new live script as this option right here, and you can go ahead and click that if you're on that pane instead, but I already made a new one from the live editor. So, I think the easiest, most direct way to compare this would be to think of a calculator, like a graphing calculator, TI-84, something like that, where you type in something like maybe sine of pi over 2. And then you hit enter. I'm not going to hit enter. Well, okay, I can. New line. But if you hit enter on a graphing calculator, it's going to do that math and it's going to tell you that the answer is 1. Well, then maybe you want to do something with that value, so you would just hit divide by 2, and it's automatically going to take that last answer, divide it by 2, and so on and so forth. So with a calculator that you're holding in your hand, you're typing in all of these operations step by step by step. I want to do this, hit enter. Type some other stuff in, hit enter. Type some other stuff in, hit enter. Now, this MATLAB environment, these lines of code, instead of you doing one line at a time that you're typing in MATLAB, you're kind of giving it all the instructions at once. You're saying, do this line, do line 1, and then do line 2, and then do line 3. Now that was just typing in some stuff to talk about the calculator, but what we really do, what we really might do, uh, is let's make a variable a and set that equal to pi over 2. Let's say that's a value that I actually want to work with. Well, then I know if I want to just divide that result by 2, well then I can say a divided by 2, and it will spit that answer out. So once I hit run, it's going to do that, and we can see up here it said a equals 1, because that is what sine of pi over 2 ends up evaluating to. And then I just said a divided by 2, and it spits that answer out right there. So essentially, instead of typing in sine of pi over 2, oh that's 1, divide by 2, I gave it all the instructions at once. And that is kind of the idea behind code. You're telling the computer, I want you to do this sequence of things in this ordered list. Do step 1, do step 2, do step 3, do step 4. And it will execute all of those in order. So that is what's happening in MATLAB. However, because MATLAB is this really fancy computer thing, sometimes we have to give it instructions to do things that we want. So let's say we want to make a mathematical function, right? Well, a computer has its own idea of what a function is. If you Google computer function, it's going to tell you this fancy coding language stuff. But the point is, a computer has its own idea of what a function is. So we need to tell MATLAB, hey, I want to make a mathematical kind of function, which we can also call, a symbolic function. Because when I write f of x equals x squared minus 1, that's me telling the computer, right? That's me, or telling you, if I write this to you, that I want to square x and then subtract 1. This is a symbolic representation of the function. So if I want to use this function that I just made, I need to tell MATLAB that I want to make a symbolic function. So I'm going to do the command to do that as syms, and if you typed it in right, this thing will pop up and it's trying to tell you what it thinks you want to type in. But I just do syms f of x, and that tells it, hey, I want to make a symbolic function and I want to name it f of x. And then in the next line, you can say exactly what that symbolic function is supposed to genuinely be. So here, line 1 says, hey, make a function named f, a symbolic function named f, and then line 2 says, okay, now my function named f is going to be this, x squared minus 1. Now the other thing is if you're a normal human, you're probably, well, if you're raised in the American school system, I should say, you're probably going to write 2 if you wanted to just multiply, if you wanted 2x squared minus 1. You're used to writing just 2x squared minus 1. But the computer doesn't really know how to handle number beside variable, right? It doesn't know what operation you're trying to do. It didn't go through the American school system, so it doesn't know when I put the 2 right beside the number, I mean multiply them together. So we need to tell it, hey, I want to multiply this by 2, so we put this star. So sometimes that's notation for multiplication, right? Writing a time sign and this star, it's kind of like the computer's time sign. Okay, so now this function will take the input, square it, and multiply it by 2, and then subtract 1. That is what f is set to do. So let me go ahead and hit run, and it will evaluate the code. And we can see here that it made the function, and it spit it out in even fancy typewriting, the symbolic function, f of x equals 2x squared minus 1. Okay, cool. So now MATLAB is really smart, and I can say something like f of 3, and now if I run my code again, it's going to do all of these operations in step, make a symbolic function named f, set that function f to be equal to what we just told it to, and then it's going to plug 3 into that function and get, well, 17. Why? Well, because 2 times 3 squared minus 1 is just going to be, oh, and here MATLAB is really smart. I made the mistake of not telling it that I wanted to multiply, right? I needed the star right there. And it's saying, hey, invalid expression. I don't know what you mean by that. Did you mean to put a star there? And I can hit fix, and it will put the star there for me. Okay. So now, again, all I'm trying to say is if I plug 3 into this function, then I would get 17. But the computer is able to do that in function notation. So I can just say f of 3 and it stores that as 17. So what we did with f is kind of the basic idea of what's going to happen with a MATLAB again and again and again, and kind of computer science coding in general. And that's the idea of variables. So computers love to store things as variables. So if I just do f of 3, that really doesn't get saved anywhere, right? You just did that and found that answer, and it just says, okay, moving on. But if I wanted to keep that answer somewhere, I need to let the computer know what variable to store that as. I need to give it a name if I want to use it again later. So I can pick whatever name I want. I'm going to just pick A. The most basic way of doing this is to pick single letters. Um, so go crazy. I could have picked P, Q, whatever. I picked the letter A. So now, instead of just doing the math and finding that the answer is 17, if I hit run to evaluate the code again, it's not only going to find that that value is 17, but it's going to save it as A. A equals 17. So now I can do a minus 5. And it's going to do 17 minus 5 is 12. And again, it's just finding an answer. It's not storing that anywhere, so it's just saying answer is 12. Cool. Now, something that we had to do in a previous part of like the homework and everything is find uh, the slope, right, of a secant line. So let's say I wanted to have slope, and it's normal to name the slope m. So let's say I want to store this as a variable m. Well, let's say I wanted to find the secant line from, and let me type this out, find the secant line from, let's say, uh, 1, 2, 3. And we're specifically wanting to find the slope of the secant line. Well, now I already stored f of x, so I'm able and ready to use it. So what is the general form of the slope? Well, I'm just going to type it in so that we remember it. y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. Well, what are our x values in this situation? Well, for us, they're going to be 1 and 3. Well, what are the y values? Well, they're the output of the function at the x values. So y2 would be the output of the function at 1. Well, that's just f of 1. And y1 would be the output of the function at 3, so that is just f of 3. Okay, well now, when I run this code, it's going to do step 1, make a symbolic function, 2, tell it what that symbolic function that it just made is equal to. It's going to do line 3, which is set the variable a equal to f of 3, and then it's going to do line 4, which is find f of 1, f of 3, plug those in here, and do this calculation. And the answer is just immediately 8. So not only does it find it, but because I said m is equal to this value, it stored that as m equals 8. So that is kind of the basics with MATLAB. We store variables. We do thing by just doing m equals whatever. We execute code line by line in order, and we kind of have to remember the names of whatever functions we're supposed to use. So here's something else that we did in an earlier lab. We wanted to use the solve command. Well, the solve command is really cool and really powerful. So if I wanted to solve for, let's say, 3 times x is equal to 4, right? We know all we have to do is divide both sides by 3, so x should just be, well, 4 over 3. Well, MATLAB can solve this function, or sorry, this equation, and a lot more, but the catch is that we don't get to use the single equal sign. Solve makes us type in 2 equal signs. The other discussion section, I kind of explained why, but if we're just running MATLAB, maybe we don't want to get into the depths of how computers handle equal signs, and it's best to just say that's just how we have to type it in to solve for it to understand what we're doing. So solve 3 times x equals 4, and we run this code, and it said, okay, well, the answer to that is 4 over 3. Okay, well, I could have done that on my own. I could have done that in my head. Let's type something a whole lot messier. 3x cubed minus, oh, and I need 3 times x cubed minus 2 times x squared plus, or let's do minus 3. And we remembered, or we discussed in class, finding the zeros to a cubic equation is a nightmare. So let's make MATLAB do that for us. Find the values for x where this is equal to 0, aka solve this equation. Now when I run the code, it's going to find the solutions to this equation, but they're so gross it doesn't even want to write them as the numbers they are. It just does this in some really weird, fancy computer symbolic form. Um, Now, I think if I tweak this a little bit, maybe we get something that looks a bit nicer. Yeah, okay. So I slightly changed the equation so that the output is something that we can read more reasonably. Um, and the answer ends up being 0 is one root, 1/3 minus root 10 over 3 is the other root, and 1/3 plus root 10 over 3 is the other root. So yeah, it can solve really, really, really messy things. Sometimes it won't even say what those answers are as numbers because they're so gross. But to MATLAB, this looks pretty clean, so it will show us exactly what that value is. So that's how we use solve. And even better, if I have a function that I've already given a name, like f of x up there, well then I can put f of x into solve and say, well, okay, give me the zeros for f of x. And now as it runs the code, it finds the zeros just like that. Positive root 2 over 2 and negative root 2 over 2. Great. So these are kind of, okay. Well, the next important thing to do is that we want to save this file. So right now, if I hit exit, I hope it warns me not to close it. Yep. Hey, this page is asking to confirm that you want to leave. Information you've entered may not have been saved, may not be saved. So let's say stay on the page or stay on the page and say, oh yeah, you're right. I forgot to save my file. So I'm going to go to save, and now it opens up all of my MATLAB Drive folders, and I choose where to save this. This is the thing that I have shared with all of y'all. So if I if I saved it in here, everyone would be able to see it, which we don't. I'll go ahead and do. Why not? Um, and I'll choose the name for it, and I'll say MATLAB 0, and I'll save it there. And now magically, I think it just appeared in everyone's. Oh, I didn't actually select the folder when I hit save. That's funny. Here, I'll save as. Now I open the folder and hit save, and now we're in the folder there. Y'all don't really need to worry about where you're saving your folders to, right? Um, Nobody should have access to this folder besides me, like to save things in there. So don't worry about that. Just save them out here. Um, yeah. Okay. So remember, MATLAB does things line by line. We can store a variable. We can store a value in a variable by just giving it a name so that I can reference it later. Um, and the other discussion sections that we have go over how to use exactly those other functions that I mentioned earlier. So as always, email me if you have any questions, but I hope this was a decent enough uh, bare bones intro to how to work MATLAB. I hope. If you're still confused, feel free to absolutely email me and we can set up a Zoom meeting if we just absolutely have to. Um, but maybe email works. I just wanted to give a visual explanation instead of just typing something. Okay, very good. See y'all in the morning if you're watching this Wednesday night, or I guess there's 4 nights of the week where I will see y'all the next morning. So anyway, bye.